Well, welcome back. Glad to have you here. It's another Wednesday Night Live being filmed to you for you on Monday. And we've already explained to you why we do that. We're glad you could join us. We have quite a bit to cover today. If you have nothing important to do tonight, like, you know, changing the air in your tires or rearranging your sock drawer, you may want to watch that fun that's going on in the Democrat convention. If you think the Republican convention was disorganized and a hoot, you ain't seen nothing yet. And if you've been watching the news today or listening on the radio, boy, they are off to a good start. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the super witch, I'll use that word, of the Democrat Party, has been relieved of her post as the spokesman or whatever. She won't be making introductions. And it was very funny to see her trying to cop a plea with her constituents in Florida after being caught red-handed suborning Bernie Sanders, their socialist champion, you know, in favor of Hillary. Now, who knows what Hillary was promised her, you know, maybe some free time on her computer, who knows. But Wasserman got caught with her hand in the cookie jar, and it is funny. The Democrats, we get this, you know, the press are so busy propping them up that we get this mistaken notion that the Democrats really have it all together. And folks, they don't have it together any better than the Republicans, and they don't have it together really, as you know. But maybe the Republicans have it a little more together, who knows. At any rate, we're going to touch on a number of these things today. We're going to try to throw a little humor in here where we can, because boy, if we don't start laughing, we're going to wind up crying. It's what's happening to our republic, what's going to happen, what potentially can happen. It ought to just scare the bejeebies out of you, and if it doesn't, what are you smoking? I could use some of that. Well, anyway, as I do every week at this time, please let me remind you of Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center, a Christ-centered nonprofit ministry offering life-affirming alternatives to abortion and compassionate care to those who face pregnancy and abortion-related issues. Now, you know, maybe you're getting tired. I've been talking about this now for, I think, about 4 years, and I begin every show with this, and there's a reason for that. These people really need your help. The unborn babies really need your help. The mothers who are going to be bearing those babies, who may be not sure and maybe even thinking about abortion, need somebody they can turn to as a truly viable alternative to abortion. Abortion is not the answer, we know that. But these folks are such a small group, they really need your help. Won't you help them? Won't you please call Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center? They're here in Pocatello, right over by the university. Little tiny place, very clean, very neat. They counsel mothers, they help them with things, giving them things they need. They teach them how to be mothers often. 478-HOPE. Please call 208-478-HOPE. See what you can do to give hope to a mother, compassion to a mother and a baby, and maybe help to save a life. You'll be glad you did. It is tax deductible, but call them and see what you can do to help. There may be other ways that you can help. 478-HOPE. You're going to be glad you did, and I'm sure some mother will be also. And I want to remind you, now this is only temporary, but it's still, I want to remind you about the get-together on Thursday, August 4th at 7 p.m. At the Roper Auditorium in Twin Falls, and that's where you'll be seeing Brigitte Gabriel. Brigitte Gabriel, she's an Arab Christian best-selling author of Because They Hate and They Must Be Stopped. She's a leading national security expert, founder of Act for America. Now, Brigitte she's a survivor of Islamic terror. She and her family immigrated to the United States not to come and reap terror, but because they wanted to be Americans. And they escaped, but they were under the thumb of the jihadists in Lebanon. You know, once Lebanon was called the Paris of the Mediterranean, and now it's just another cesspool filled with angry Muslims and jihadists. But she knows her stuff. Now, she speaks the language. So it's, you know, they can't just put something over on her when one of these Muslim fanatics from CARE or some other group decide to go off on a diatribe. She knows what they're saying, and they can't lie to her. She's very articulate, lovely lady. I'm looking forward to meeting her. That's Thursday, August the 4th, 7 p.m. at the Roper Auditorium in Twin Falls. Now, you need to call, or you need to send an email and reserve some tickets. It's free. There's no admission price for this. There's no fee for it, but they need to get a head count so they have an idea of how many people they're going to be serving, with the group. So here's where to go. Go to, let's see here, www.eventbrite, and that's one word, event, E-V-E-N-T-B-R-I-T-E, eventbrite.com/E/Brigitte.Gabriel. And I think if you just go to eventbrite.com, they'll probably give you a whole list of things they're doing. Just look up this thing, August 4th, 7 p.m., Roper Auditorium in Twin Falls. Folks, if we don't teach ourselves, if we don't go to people like this who have been there and done that, if we don't learn what Islam has in store with us or for us before it's too late, we're going to be gone. Because it is the nightmare of Islam to have a one-world caliphate where you will not exist as an individual human being. Those things that you have been born and bred with that are guaranteed under the Constitution will cease to exist when Sharia is the law of the land. And it's already being implemented in some places. In fact, I'm going to share one with you in a minute, and you probably won't even recognize it as Sharia until I explain to you what that means. Anyway, don't forget again, August 4th, 7 p.m., Roper Auditorium, Twin Falls. Be there for Brigitte Gabriel, and I think you'll find it worthwhile. Well, I wanted to start off with an interesting little thing. Excuse me. It may sound familiar to me. If you've had any kids, you've sent any kids off to college, or your children have sent some kids off to college, they're always needing money, and you're never quite sure. Sometimes you're wondering, what are they really doing with the money? Well, here's a little story you might find enlightening. A young Arkansas boy went off to college. Halfway through the semester, having foolishly squandered all his money on his girlfriend, he called home. "Dad," he says, "you won't believe what a modern education is developing. They actually have a program here at Hendricks that will teach our dog, Old Blue, how to talk." "That's amazing," his dad says. "How do I get Old Blue in that program?" "Just send him over here with $1,000, the young Arky says, "and I'll get him into the course." So his father sends the dog and $1,000. About 2/3 of the way through the semester, the money again runs out. The boy calls home. "So how's Old Blue doing, son?" his father asked. "Awesome, Dad. He's talking up a storm. But you just won't believe this. They've had such good results, they started to teach the animals how to talk. Or read." "Read," says his father. "No kidding. How do we get Blue into that program?" Son says, "Just send $2,500. I'll get him in the class." The money promptly arrives. The Arky and his girlfriend are able to buy enough marijuana to last the whole semester, but our hero has a problem. At the end of the year, his father will find out the dog can neither talk nor read. Even though he was always pretty much able to lie his way out of trouble, the Arky asked his girlfriend to help him think up a really good lie to tell his dad. She very quickly came up with a plan for him. So she has him shoot the dog. When he arrives home at the end of the year, his father is really excited. "Where's Old Blue? I just can't wait to see him read something and talk." "Dad," the boy says, "I have some grim news. Yesterday morning, just before we left to drive home, Old Blue was in the living room, kicked back in his recliner, reading the Wall Street Journal, like he usually does. Then Old Blue turned to me and asked, 'So is your daddy still messing around with that little redhead that lives down the street?' The father went white and exclaimed, 'I hope you shot that lying dog before he talks to your mother.' 'I sure did, Dad. That's my boy.' The kid married his girlfriend. They both went off to law school in Fayetteville. He became governor of Arkansas and president of the United States. Well, and you already know about his girlfriend. So a little Democrat humor there for you. Or maybe that's Republican humor. I don't think the Democrats would want to admit to something as awesome as that. Speaking of the woman, we know who we're talking about. I don't know, maybe you weren't as tuned in on politics 40 years ago, 30 years ago, but a friend of mine sent this to me, and I wish I had the whole thing. He just sent me a snippet. I've seen this whole thing before, and it talks about good old Hillary. But here's a reminder, and I remember when this happened. Now, I wasn't as engaged in politics then as I am now, so it had its own significance, but it was a little different. Let me share this with you. As a 27-year-old staff attorney for the House Judiciary Committee during the Watergate investigation, Hillary Rodham was fired by her supervisor, lifelong Democrat Jerry Zeifman. When asked why Hillary Rodham was fired, Zeifman said in an interview, quote, "Because she was a liar. She was an unethical, dishonest lawyer. She conspired to violate the Constitution, the rules of the House, the rules of the committee, and the rules of confidentiality." So the more things change, the less they change. And I remember when that happened because it hit the news very briefly and then it just kind of just went away. But some things just don't really go away forever. Well, you know, with the Democrat convention now, one of the things the Democrats are real big on, and they're going to be talking about a whole lot, is gun control. You know, as Obama likes to say, you know, one Muslim doing something bad shouldn't reflect on the whole community. But of course, in his parlance, one gun owner doing something bad, every gun is a problem. Well, let's see what kind of a problem that really is. In 1865, a Democrat shot and killed Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States. In 1881, a left-wing radical Democrat shot James Garfield, President of the United States, who later died from the wound. In 1963, a radical left-wing socialist shot and killed John F. Kennedy, President of the United States. In 1975, a left-wing radical Democrat fired shots at Gerald Ford, President of the United States. In 1983, a registered Democrat shot and wounded Ronald Reagan, President of the United States. In 1984, James Hubert, a disgruntled Democrat, shot and killed 22 people in a McDonald's restaurant. In 1986, Patrick Sherrill, a disgruntled Democrat, shot and killed 15 people in an Oklahoma post office. In 1990, James Poole, a disgruntled Democrat, shot and killed 10 people at a GMAC office. In 1991, George Hennard, a disgruntled Democrat, shot and killed 23 people in a Luby's cafeteria in Killeen, Texas. In 1995, James Daniel Simpson, a disgruntled Democrat, shot and killed 5 co-workers in a Texas laboratory. In 1999, Larry Ashbrook, a disgruntled Democrat, shot and killed 8 people at a church service. In 2001, a left-wing radical Democrat fired shots at the White House in a failed attempt to kill George W. Bush, President of the United States. In 2003, Douglas Williams, a disgruntled Democrat, shot and killed 7 people at a Lockheed Martin plant. In 2007, a registered Democrat named Seung Hui Cho shot and killed 32 people in Virginia Tech. In 2010, a mentally ill registered Democrat named Jared Lee Lochner shot Representative Gabriel Giffords and killed 6 others. In 2011, a registered Democrat named James Holmes went into a movie theater and shot and killed 12 people. In 2012, Andrew Engeldinger, a disgruntled Democrat, shot and killed 7 people in Minneapolis. In 2013, a registered Democrat named Adam Lanza shot and killed 26 people in a school in Newtown, Connecticut. September 2013, an angry Democrat shot 12 at a Navy shipyard. 2 weeks ago, a Muslim Hillary Clinton supporter and registered Democrat murdered 49 in a nightclub in Orlando. Clearly, there's a problem with Democrats and guns. Not one NRA member, Tea Party member, or Republican conservative was involved in any of these shootings and murders. So, proposed solution, make it illegal for Democrats to own guns. We don't need gun control, we need Democrat control. Guns don't kill people, Democrats do. Sometimes fact is stranger than fiction. Well, I don't know, let's see, we've got a couple of things we're going to get to. Well, let me do a couple of, we've got a couple of DVD, short ones for you. I think you'll find them interesting. But before we do that, I've got to share with you, July 23rd, I don't know if you read this, there was a really ugly letter to the editor by Gloria A. Mayer of Pocatello, and she was castigating Reverend Jonathan Dinger. Now, Jonathan Dinger, as you know, is the pastor of Grace Lutheran Church, and previously Helen Avila Hunt went after him with a couple of meat hooks in her own inimicable way, and well, there was a response. I don't think I've got that response. It was some weeks later by a minister at one of the local Christian churches who basically said, you know, he didn't name her, but he said, hey, Helen, you're wrong. I mean, and it was a very well-crafted letter. Well, I guess that must have gotten to Miss Mayer, because Miss Mayer now has decided that she needs to jump on the bandwagon, and she wrote this lovely little missive. Reverend Jonathan Dinger, response to Reverend Dinger, Helen Avila had the tenacity to put in writing what many of us saw in your article. It was self-promotion combined with a sad attempt to distract from the tragedy in Orlando. You tried to overwhelm the Orlando tragedy by one-upping it and distracting from the tragedy and the principal issues surrounding it. You know, it makes me wonder what they're reading. You chided her for not contacting you. Well, and that was interesting too, because, well, let's go on. That is indicative of the narrow religious thinking that puts women below men. Really? The implication is, what right-thinking woman would dare openly criticize you? You signified that she should have contacted you. That logic demonstrates a foundation of not valuing women as your peers. What a ridiculous statement. What was wrong with you reaching out to contact her before writing your piece? You never mentioned reaching out to Miss Avila. I've got to stop myself here, and I have to ask myself, why would Pastor Dinger have to reach out to Helen Avila Hunt, what, to get her permission to write an article? He was writing from his heart, his heartfelt sympathies with what had happened there. Does that mean that if Dinger or anybody else wants to write anything, that they must first go to, because he never mentioned Helen Avila Hunt. She went after him. He never mentioned her. He had no reason to. He was talking about Orlando. But does that mean, according to this mayor's logic, then if you or I or Pastor Dinger or anybody else want to write something, we must first check with Helen Avila Hunt, or maybe we need to check with Miss Mayer and see if it's okay. How ridiculous does it get? Well, it does. It gets more. By the way, in my book, any grouping of religious people such as Grace Lutheran, and the Missouri Synod Church, who see themselves as so separate and apart from other faith groups and even other Christians, easily qualify as radical religious extremists. Really? Well, first of all, we don't see ourselves, and as you know, folks, I am a member at Grace. Jonathan Dinger is he's the senior pastor, my pastor. We don't see ourselves separate in any way, shape, or form. We see ourselves as brothers and sisters of the cross, brothers and sisters of the gospel, brothers and sisters in salvation, and that we have been redeemed. That's how we see ourselves. We don't see ourselves as separate or anything else. But I digress. You clearly state that you do not participate with the interfaith group. I would dare to say it is because the group is not a Christian group, but an interfaith group that has Unitarians, Baha'i, Muslim, Jewish, LDS, and other representatives present. Okay, you dare to say. That's your observation. Doesn't make it right. As to community engagement, there are many interfaith venues where you and members of Grace Lutheran are conspicuously absent. None of them are mentioned here, of course. Today we need people of all faiths to reach out to others who are different from them and engage them in sincere and genuine dialogue, like she's doing here. Sincere and genuine dialogue. Those who staunchly avoid such contact are often identified as radical religious extremists. Really? We still remember how Grace Lutheran sponsored the anti-LDS seminars of James Spencer. While your targets have changed and you use greater subtlety, your tactics have not. And I have no idea what she's talking about. None. I've been a member of LCMS churches for most of my life. Now, you notice she says of churches. She doesn't necessarily say that she's a member of the LCMS faith, but I attended a Lutheran grade school, high school, and college. I taught in a Lutheran school for 3 years until I accepted an offer to become part of the Division of Service to Military Personnel, LCMS, and eventually Concordia Publishing House. In short, I have a pretty thorough knowledge of Missouri Synod, yet I have always thought of myself as a Christian first and a Lutheran second. Well, Ms. Mayer has apparently forgotten that Lutheran Church Missouri Synod would much rather be referred to just as evangelical. The tag was put on them to differentiate between synods, but it's not like we're Lutherans. Well, we're evangelicals. We study the Lutheran tenets, obviously. I believe that's the example Christ gives us, putting him first. In his ministry, Jesus did not associate with people just like himself. You're right about that. Nor did he wait for people to come to him and have them make an appointment. Whatever that means. He was there to minister to them, whoever they were, wherever they were, with whatever they needed. We are called to do no less, even Missouri Synod Lutherans. Gloria A. Mayer Pocatello. I have to tell you that Ms. Mayer was way off my radar until I read this ridiculous piece of puffery, self-important that she is. And so I thought, well, who in the heck is this woman? I think I know most of the radical left in town, not most of them, but I sure know those who are outspoken, because most of them have gone after me once in a while, and I never heard of this woman. I'm sure she's heard of me, but I never heard of her. So I decided to find out who she is. Well, here's a little interesting little piece of information on Miss Mayer. Gloria Mayer is a 60s-plus grandma who is in a long-term lesbian relationship with a lady named Connie Christensen. She came out at a city council meeting for the ordinance. That was the non-discrimination ordinance. And I looked it up, and sure as heck, here she is, where she's talking about coming out publicly for the first time to support the measure, including Gloria Mayer, a 63-year-old grandma. Mayer said, "I'm gay. That is the first time I've said that publicly. It's not that I'm embarrassed to be gay, but I've always felt that who I love is nobody's business. Sometimes you have to stand up for what you believe in, so here I am." Okay. We have it on good authority that she has come out multiple times. She likes to come out, make herself visible, you know, and is one of the angriest individuals around. Now, that has come from a number of people that have said, "Hey, Ralph, you know who this nutcase is?" That's who she is. She's a member of Good Shepherd Lutheran, Elka. Now, Elka has been disfellowshipped from us, and the reason for that is they have strayed way far away from the basic doctrines and tenets of the Christian faith. And we don't have to go into all of that right now, but if you are a Trinitarian Christian, if you are a creedal Christian, if you are a confessional Christian, if you believe that Holy Communion is a sacrament and not more than just taking bread and water, or bread and grape juice, or if you believe that baptism is a sacrament, you would have some problems with Elka. Our church, our synod, as well as several other synods, do not recognize same-gender marriage or same-sex marriage. We do not recognize homosexuals in the clergy, in the pastoral thing. So we have a real difference between us and Elka. Apparently, she likes Elka; she fits right in there. And because it's a church body that rejects the authority of scriptures and the consensual teachings of the church. So, in other words, I'm surprised she hasn't tried to attack Orthodox Christians more often. And that's pretty much. Now, I find it interesting that also she's on the Mayor's Human Relations Committee for 2015-2019. I'm really curious as to how Mayor Blad selects people for his committee, because the Human Relations Committee, it reads like the who's who of the far left in this town, the leftists in this town. And in the past they've had, like right now they have Jennifer Seek, I don't know who that is. These are award winners. Last year, Billy Johnson. Billy Johnson, very vocal, very visible in the LGBTQ community, just married the woman of her dream, or is about to marry the woman of her dreams. So she is a homosexual advocate, way out front, award winner. Roger Bray and Roger Chase. Roger Bray is left of Roger Chase, if that's possible. Roger Bray, award winner. John Peirce in 2013, don't know him. Edgar Malapine, nice guy. I know Edgar not well, but I know him. But he is a very liberal, progressive Democrat. 2011, Bonnie France and Too Great for Hate, or as I often say, Great for Hate, another very left organization. 2008, James Yezar, don't know him. 2007, Clayton Diggy. 2006, Verona Hibbert. So an overwhelming number of the people who are prize winners are also very liberal, very leftist, and it just makes me wonder. No wonder we come up with the things we have in the city that don't seem to, maybe to the rest of us, to make any sense. Look who's running the city, who's making the decisions on social issues, the far left. Now, this is a little article, real quick, that goes back to March of this year. I think it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek. It's from the Mideast Beast. It's online. I've never heard of it before. By a guy named Roger Pumper. And Roger says, Following the terrorist attacks in Paris last November, which claimed 129 lives, the recent capture of suspect Salah Abdeslam, and the most recent attack in Nice, killing over 80 people, French President François Hollande announced his intention of finding his inner Robespierre and employing the guillotine to execute ISIS or ISIS-linked terrorists. To be honest with you, I don't know if he even has an inner Robespierre, but quoting, "While we have not beheaded anyone in a really, really long time, the chance to see these jihadist something heads getting their heads lopped off is just too good to pass up," Hollande said in a press conference. Like I said, I think it's tongue-in-cheek. In response, ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi has filed a grievance with the UN Human Rights Council, calling France's treatment of ISIS terrorists totally unfair. "You can't just go around beheading people," Baghdadi declared. "Aren't there international laws against this? I demand that all our captured fighters be treated humanely." Following France's announcement, U.S. President Barack Obama formally apologized for ordering an airstrike against ISIS executioner Jihadi John. And maybe it's tongue-in-cheek, maybe it's not. This kind of goes back to, well, it goes back to May, and you may not have heard this, but I think it's worth repeating. You may recall when I told you that London has elected a Muslim mayor, and that, you think of the history of London, centuries of the history of London, and now the mayor of London is a Muslim. That should really give you something to think about. Well, anyway, this came from the U.S. Herald. London Islamic mayor's warning to Trump: let Muslims into America or face terrorist attacks. The new Muslim mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has issued a warning to Donald Trump: moderate your stance on Muslims or they will launch more attacks against America. By Bob Amoroso. When we as Americans think of terrorist enclaves, we automatically think of ISIS strongholds in the Middle East, places like Syria, Libya, Ramadi, and seldom of a place like London. And yet London is indeed a Muslim radical enclave of not only hidden terrorist cells, but more openly of British legislators and elected officials who have publicly warned and perhaps are even calling for attacks on one of our own presidential nominees, namely Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump. There's no doubt Britain, like many European countries, has capitulated for decades on the continued and growing threat of Muslim migrations into their countries and turning a blind eye to the radicalization taking place. Their refusal to acknowledge that Muslims prefer subjection rather than assimilation of their host country, thus the creation of the new mayor of London, Mayor Sadiq Khan. Trump recently praised Sadiq Khan for winning London's mayoral race and said he'd be willing to create an exception in his policy restricting Muslim entry into the United States in order to allow Khan to visit. But in his statement Tuesday, Khan dismissed Trump's invitation and also denounced his views on Islam as ignorant. Moreover, Khan has some serious and troublesome history, some of which includes his defense of Islamist extremist Azam Tamimi and his platform sharing with Suleiman Ghani, a South London imam who has urged female subservience to men and called for the founding of an Islamic State. That should give us something to think about. Well, I have a DVD I'd like to share with you, and it kind of goes along these lines of what's going on in Britain. Josh, are we ready to go on that first one? Thumbs up? Okay. Please watch this.
How can you tell when a civilization is in danger of collapse? Well, that's easy. It's when every leader of every country that makes up Western civilization no longer accepts reality and deals only in lies and cowardice when presented with genuine danger. In the midst of worldwide Islamic violence, war, terror, torture and rape, we're told Islam is a religion of peace, over and over again. It's a sign of total cowardice to state Islam is peaceful, when it is undoubtedly an ideology of supremacism and war. Islam is the Quran is Muhammad, and Muhammad was a warlord and a murderer. Now, Mecca today is the international shrine to Muhammad, but it didn't used to be. First he had to defeat the Meccans when they laid siege to his exiled home in Medina. Muhammad won the battle and was then involved in the execution by beheading of 700 Jewish male members of Medina's Qurayza tribe. The women and children were taken as slaves and sex slaves, and beheading as we now know only too well, seems a particular favourite amongst Muslim murderers, and this is because it's instructed in the Quran, in any number of verses. Quran 5:33. The punishment of those who wage war against Allah and His Messenger is execution by beheading or crucifixion, or the cutting off of hands and feet from opposite sides. Quran verse 8:12. I will instill terror into the hearts of the unbelievers, smite ye above their necks and smite all their fingertips off. Nice one. Quran 47:4. Therefore when ye meet the unbelievers, strike off their heads. So you see, Mr. Cameron, when Muslim murderers cut off soldiers' heads in London whilst quoting the Quran, it does, contrary to every lie that you've told, have everything to do with Islam. Now, David Cameron seems unaware that the perfect man in Muslims' eyes was a supremacist warlord, a murderer, and a sex enslaver of little girls. But then everything about Islam is supremacist. Islam translated means submission. Come on, what sort of a religion of peace calls itself submission? And what happens if you want to leave this religion of peace? You become an apostate, and the sentence for apostasy is death. So in other words, if you want to leave the religion of peace, you'll be killed. How peaceful is that, Mr. Cameron? Can't you see it? This religion of peace, this religion of Islam, kills its own women if they bring dishonour upon a family. Honour killings, honour violence, the stoning to death of adulteresses, the hanging of homosexuals. How can a religion which carries out these acts of savagery and barbarism possibly be considered a part of a peaceful religion? Again, I ask you the question, Mr. Cameron. Islam divides the world into two spheres, the area where Islam rules and the area where it does not. Now, the first is called the Dar al-Islam, which means the House of Islam, or the House of Submission, and the second is called the Dar al-Harb, which means the House of War. How many peaceful religions call areas they don't control the House of War, Mr. Cameron? All Western countries with large and growing Muslim populations find themselves, whether they like it or not, in the House of War, which is why, precisely why, our security services are engaged in a constant battle trying to stop the followers of the religion of peace blowing us up on trains, planes and buses. And good old Muhammad, he wasn't just a warlord, he was also a rapist and a sex slaver, which is exactly why we see rape and sex slavery happening today, and not just in Syria, but in towns and cities all across the West, wherever there are large numbers of Muslims. Notably Malmö in Sweden, which is now the rape capital of Europe, and the Islamic State, ISIS, Islamic State, is currently, right now today, selling sex slaves in Syria, as are Boko Haram in Nigeria, and Britain has recently passed a new sex slavery bill in an attempt to halt sex slavery in England, which is yet another aspect of cultural enrichment we are supposed to celebrate that we didn't used to have to do before Islam arrived on our shores. And the reason why modern-day Muslims rape young girls in Western countries is because they don't recognize non-Muslim or infidel laws anyway, but young girls are deemed sexually permissible to Muslims in England because their perfect man Muhammad married one of his wives, Aisha, when she was 6, and consummated the marriage when she was 9. But you don't consummate a marriage with a 9-year-old girl, you rape her. And the Muslim rape epidemic carried out against non-Muslim underage girls in Britain is specifically down to Muhammad and the Quran. And no doubt the next time such a story breaks in England, when the next Rotherham one comes around, David Cameron will come out and tell us that not only is Islam a religion of peace, it's also a religion of sexual abstinence and purity. Now come on, Mr. Cameron, enough of your lies and your cowardice. You really can't deny reality any longer. Islam poses the greatest threat to our civilization we have ever seen, and the history of Islam consists of centuries of war against us, against the West, and today the Muslim population is growing 9 times faster than any other demographic in Britain, and demographers are predicting a Muslim majority amongst the young before 2050. What do you think the country will look like then? Do you honestly think we can avoid a civil war when expansionist Islam is so warlike, so intolerant, and so supremacist. And the thing is, you know, this could be dealt with today, but to appease it, as you're doing, Mr. Cameron, hoping it will eat you last like Winston Churchill's crocodile, is a total betrayal of your country and a total betrayal of our children and grandchildren.
Well, that was a member of Parliament, which is roughly equivalent to our House of Representatives. I didn't get his name. On the original document, or original thing, it did have his name. And obviously, David Cameron is no longer the minister, the Prime Minister of England or Great Britain, and is now a lady named May. But that makes the point. And it makes the point, isn't it interesting, the parallels between what Cameron was doing with his country, lying to them and fomenting this Islamist patty back, whatever you want to call it, and what Barack Hussein Obama has been doing here. Matter of fact, here's a story from thepoliticalheat.com. This just came out yesterday. Let me share this with you. It's by Dan Adams. Don't know the guy and never heard of politicalheat.com before, but we'll share this. Here we have another situation where Barack Hussein Obama will do absolutely nothing in regards to this yet again horrific example that Islam is not the religion of peace. The billion-plus silent majority of Islam better step up, or all of us are going to call out what Islam is all about. What State Department spokesman Mark C. Toner said after videos began circulating on social media showing President Barack Obama's Syrian rebel friends beheading a boy suspected of being a pro-government fighter perfectly demonstrated this administration's pure cowardice. Now, I have to tell you before I read the rest of the article, my wife viewed this. In fact, she just viewed it today. And she gave me a very interesting reason. I said, why would you? She viewed the beheading of this 12-year-old boy. Now think about it. Parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, doesn't matter. A 12-year-old boy. And I saw this kid. He's a skinny little nothing. He's certainly no warrior. In fact, apparently he is somewhat slow or retarded. Well, he no longer exists thanks to Islam and their Prophet Muhammad's teachings. I asked her why she watched this, and her answer was very interesting. She said, it's important that we in the West see what these people are doing, that we be able to testify to what we have seen, the horrors that Islam is bringing upon the entire globe. This is not just something happening in some little place in the Middle East where people are still heating their oil with their dinners with camel dung. This is throughout the entire world. This scourge upon the face of the earth is happening everywhere. And we, as human beings in the Western civilized world, need to be able to give testimony to what we have seen. Now, does that mean you should go out of your way to watch every one of these? Well, you have to decide that for yourself. Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And it is an horrific thing to see a human being beheaded by one of these satanic demons in the name of their Allah. Well, anyway, so I go on it. Now, this is a quote. If, as you said, this is one of the State Department spokesmen, if, as you said, we can prove that this was indeed what happened and this group was involved in it, I think it would certainly give us pause, he said. Pause? This is Mark C. Toner, spokesman for Obama, during a State Department briefing this Tuesday in Washington, D.C. When reporters then asked Toner whether this meant the Syrian rebels, whom the Obama administration supports, would face some kind of consequence, he again resorted to his feeble rhetoric about a pause. I can't say what consequences will be, but it will certainly give us, as I said, serious pause. And we'll look at, frankly, any affiliation or cooperation with this group we may have going forward if these allegations are proven true, he said. In other words, like Obama, well, you know, the facts aren't all in yet. Following comments are posted by bloggers, and just a couple of comments. I'll go on beyond that, though. According to Al Jazeera, the boy murdered by the rebels was Abdullah Isa, a poor, impoverished, and ill child who was anything but a fighter. He lived in Al-Mashhad, which is Aleppo, with his family, among multiple poor families that live in the area under the control of terrorists. A statement by the Jewish Jerusalem Brigade read, by taking one glance at the child, the argument that he was a fighter is immediately disproved. Those twisted terrorists, reportedly members of the Harakat Nur al-Din al-Zinki insurgent group, murdered an innocent boy and then celebrated afterwards. Moreover, video evidence from the beheading appeared to prove it. And you can watch it if you want to. And you know, that if we continue to ignore these things, if we will not look at the evidence, and we can say, well, I didn't see that, that's not going to be the cop-out. And someday we're going to have to answer for the fact that we let this happen, we knew about it, we could testify, and we didn't. Yet all the State Department has to say is that it might give them pause. Whatever the heck that means. What a pitiful, tragic, and horrifying joke. Even more tragic is that this is the same department that obsesses over so-called domestic Islamophobia, yet casts its glance elsewhere in the face of pure, true evil. Will the liberal mainstream media ever report this? Well, anyway, 12-year-old boy. So Islam shows its true face once again. Before I get to my next DVD, short one, I wanted to share this with you. Remember I told you at the top of the program that Sharia is already being implemented in our country. It's creeping Sharia. Most of us don't even recognize it when we see it. Listen to this. Pardon me. This is from Scorched Earth News, June 11th. Judge rules TSA cannot pat down women in burqa as it violates their religion. What can go wrong? Apparently, patting down women wearing burqas at airports is not happening anymore, as a judge ruled that such a treatment violates the burqa-wearing woman's rights to religion. The Council on American Islamic Relations, CARE, has issued a travel notice to Muslim airline passengers warning them that new regulations from the Transportation Security Administration violate certain religious rules. Whose religious rules? Certainly not yours and mine. According to CARE, the TSA's new enhanced pat-down policy should be limited to searching only around Muslim women's head and neck if they are wearing a hijab, and that Muslims objecting to the enhanced full-body scans have the right to request the pat-down procedure be done in a private place. From CARE's press release. Special recommendations for Muslim women who wear hijab. If you are selected for secondary screening after you go through the metal detector and it does not go off, and SSS is not written on your boarding pass, ask the TSA officer if the reason you are being selected is because of your headscarf. Now, burqa and a hijab are not the same thing. The burqa is the full body covering, even the eyes. The hijab is basically a scarf. In this situation, you may be asked to submit to a pat-down or go through a full-body scanner. If you are selected for the scanner, you may ask to go through a pat-down instead. Before you are patted down, you should remind the TSA officer that they are only supposed to pat down the area in question. In this scenario, your head and neck. They should not subject you to a full body or partial body pat-down. You may ask to be taken to a private room for the pat-down procedure. Instead of the pat-down, you can always request to pat down your own scarf, including head and neck area, and have the officers perform a chemical swipe of your hands. It just gets dumber and dumber. In February, the Fiqh Council of North America, a group of Islamic scholars, issued a fatwa, or religious ruling, that full-body scanners violate Islamic law. Well, we sure don't want to violate Islamic law. It is a violation of clear Islamic teaching that men or women be seen naked by other men and women. The ruling states Islam highly emphasizes haya, modesty, and considers it part of the faith. The Quran has commanded the believers, both men and women, to cover their private parts. According to the Detroit Free Press, CARE endorsed the fatwa. If any passenger refuses the full body scan, new regulations call for new enhanced head-to-toe pat-down procedures. Pat-downs are one important tool to help TSA detect hidden and dangerous items such as explosives. And it goes on. Well, you get the picture. Remember I shared with you last year about a woman, I think she was in Michigan, who really got upset when the police officer would not accept her driver's license because there was nothing there. There was this black blob because she was wearing a burqa. Somebody in the licensing bureau figured that was identification enough. It'd be like you wearing a sack over your head at a Cubs game. You're wearing it so nobody will know who you are. Remember when we did that? Well, all right. Well, let's go on to the next one. This is Brigitte Gabriel now. I told you about her. Again, reminding you, August 4th, 7 p.m., Roper Auditorium, Twin Falls. This is the lady we're talking about. Josh, can we take that next one?
Alaikum. Peace to you all. My name is Saba Ahmed. I'm a law student at American University. I am here to ask you a simple question. I know that we portray Islam and all Muslims as bad, but there's 1.8 billion Muslim followers of Islam. We have 8 million plus Muslim Americans in this country, and I don't see them represented here. But my question is, how can we fight an ideological war with weapons? How can we ever end this war? The jihadist ideology that you talk about, it's an ideology. How can you ever win this thing if you don't address it ideologically?
Great question. I am so glad you're here, and I am so glad you brought that up because it gives us an opportunity to answer. What I find so amazing is since the beginning of this panel, which we are here about Benghazi attack against our people, not one person mentioned Muslims. We are here against Islam, or we're launching war against Muslims. We are here to discuss how 4 Americans died and what our government is doing. We were not here to bash Muslims. You were the one who brought up the issue about most Muslims, not us. And since you brought it up, allow me to elaborate with my answer. There are 1.2 billion Muslims in the world today. Of course, not all of them are radicals. The majority of them are peaceful people. The radicals are estimated to be between 15 to 25%, according to all intelligence services around the world. That leaves 75% of them peaceful people. But when you look at 15 to 25% of the world Muslim population, you're looking at 180 million to 300 million people dedicated to the destruction of Western civilization. That is as big of the United States. So why should we worry about the radicals, 15 to 25%? Because it is the radicals that kill. Because it is the radicals that behead and massacre. When you look throughout history, when you look at all the lessons of history, most Germans were peaceful. Yet the Nazis drove the agenda. And as a result, 60 million people died. Almost 14 million in concentration camps. 6 million were Jews. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. When you look at Russia, most Russians were peaceful as well. Yet the Russians were able to kill 20 million people. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. When you look at China, for example, most Chinese were peaceful as well. Yet the Chinese were able to kill 70 million people. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. When you look at Japan prior to World War II, most Japanese were peaceful as well. Yet Japan was able to butcher its way across Southeast Asia, killing 12 million people, mostly killed with bayonets and shovels. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. On September 11th in the United States, we had 2.3 million Arab Muslims living in the United States. It took 19 hijackers, 19 radicals to bring America down to its knees, destroy the World Trade Center, attack the Pentagon, and kill almost 3,000 Americans that day. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. So for all our powers of reasons and us talking about moderate and peaceful Muslims, I'm glad you're here. But where are the others speaking out? And since you are the only Muslim representative, applause till the end. Thank you. Thank you. And since you're the only Muslim representative in here, you took the limelight instead of speaking about why our government, and I assume, are you an American? You're an American citizen. So as an American citizen, you sat in this room, and instead of standing up and saying a question or asking something about our 4 Americans that died and what our government is doing to correct the problem, you stood there to make a point about peaceful, moderate Muslims. I wish you brought 10 with you to question about how we can hold our government responsible. It is time we take political correctness and throw it in the garbage where it belongs and stop calling it.
How many times have I told you about political correctness and throw it in the trash can of ridiculous? Well, she kind of paraphrased that better than I would. There was an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal for this last Sunday edition. I'm not going to, it's a lengthy article, but I wanted to give you just a little insight into the Muslim mind of the dedicated fundamentalist Muslim and how they think. Now, this is a quote from the President Erdogan, the president of Turkey. Now, we sometimes cast Turkey when we think of them maybe Middle Eastern, maybe European, and they kind of have their foot in both sides of the bridge, both sides of that bank there. But folks, they are becoming more and more radicalized Islamists all the time, especially under Erdogan. Just very quickly, let me share this with you. In 1999, a former mayor of Istanbul named Recep Tayyip Erdogan was imprisoned and banned from politics for life for reciting a poem. The poem reads as such: "Our minarets are our bayonets. Our domes are our helmets. Our mosques are our barracks." My reference is Islam. If I'm not able to speak of this, what is the use of living? And you can't get more jihadist and more fundamental than that. He is basically saying he is bought, paid for, completely, thoroughly, inside out, up, top to bottom, whatever, side to side. His whole life is Islam, and the teaching of Islam is completely contrary to the teachings of Judeo-Christian thought and Western civilization. But there's an added thing to this. They're trying to portray him as being a secularist. He is not. But it shows how the Islamists are fooling Westerners, especially idiots like, well, they're not fooling Obama. He is a Muslim. But those who side with the Obamianists in their twisted logic, it shows how the Islamists actually think. And it says, modern Islamists have often viewed democracy not as a value in itself, but merely as a tactic to bring about a true Islamic order. To them, the voting booth was simply the most feasible way to dismantle secular systems. In 2005, Mr. Erdogan let slip on his trip to Australia that he viewed democracy as just a vehicle. In other words, they're using our system to subvert the system so that it can become Islamic and Sharia. You must never forget that. These people, they hate everything we stand for, and they have a lot of friends. Well, quickly, I don't have time to share my last video, but I do have time to share this with you. Perhaps you've been hearing on television recently about white privilege. Now, you may not know you had white privilege, or you may not feel all that privileged to begin with, or you may not quite understand what white privilege is. I don't think I thought of myself as being white privileged, but according to Black Lives Matter and all the other radical left-wing groups that I'm sure Great for Hate and their friends really like, you and I, if we're white, we're not right. So here's this is from The Blaze, July 1st, by Trey Goins Phillips. Instructors at one private K-8 school in Manhattan are teaching their white students that they are born racist, training them to feel guilty for benefiting from white privilege, while offering praise and benefits to their black counterparts. Administrators at the Bank Street School for Children on the Upper West Side told the New York Post it is their way of addressing discrimination, adding that many other private New York institutions are implementing similar practices, but many are pushing back against the method, including liberal parents. The school of 430 students is separating white children from their black peers and putting them in classes where they are forced to feel horrible about their whiteness. At the same time, all the kids of color are put in other rooms where they are instructed to feel proud about their race, and their pride is reinforced with treats and special privileges. Ever since Ferguson, the city of the riots, the school has been increasing anti-white propaganda in its curriculum, one parent who spoke on condition of anonymity because he has children currently enrolled at the school said of the policy. Bank Street has established a dedicated space for kids of color where they are embraced by other minority instructors and encouraged to voice their feelings and share experiences about being a kid of color, according to a school slideshow obtained by the Post. But white students don't enjoy the same treatment. Instead, they are gathered in classrooms where they are taught to raise their awareness of the prevalence of whiteness and privilege and challenge notions of color blindness and assumptions of normal, good, and American. They are also taught to understand their European heritage and acknowledge their tie to privilege. Parents say the controversial curriculum, Racial Justice and Advocacy, is about teachers pushing white students to deal with the United States history of racism. Then the white children are indoctrinated into believing systemic racism still exists in America, and they are part of the problem and must hold themselves accountable even for the acts committed by others. 100% of the curriculum is what whites have done to other races, another Bank Street parent said. They offer nothing that would balance the story. Any questions they can't answer, they rationalize under the pretense of institutional racism, which is never really defined, the unnamed parent added. According to the parents, the racially diverse curriculum intentionally instills in white children a strong sense of guilt about the color of their skin. The program is being implemented so intensely, some kids have reportedly come home in tears, telling their moms and dads, "I'm a bad person." Because of the Bank Street practices, many white kids are being conditioned to think any success they find in life is not something they truly earned. For example, one student at the school is seen confessing on a Bank Street video, "I feel guilty for having a privilege I don't deserve." While many parents believe the class only serves to further divide the students, breeding resentment between races, Anshu Wahi, the social justice activist who leads the program, believes the best answer to racism is for white kids to see race in everything, a process she calls white racial socialization, according to the Post. In Wahi's mind, the once popular idea of being colorblind is nothing more than a cop-out and an excuse to ignore the hardships black people face in the United States. She also believes it's a tool of whiteness to perpetuate oppression of black people, according to one paper she instructed parents to read. The social justice warrior even believes white babies exhibit signs of racism, so she encourages parents to begin discussing race with their children as early as kindergarten, making them overly aware of differences between races and examining their own whiteness. And it goes on and ad nauseum. Well, it's a brave new world we're entering, folks, and it's not going to get any better as long as we have people like Obama, Hillary, and their ilk running the country. We're out of time. God bless you. I sure appreciate your joining us. Remember now to pray for your family, pray for Israel, pray for our nation. Take all the time you can to love your family and be with them. And I hope we'll see you again next week. God bless you and God bless our nation. Good night.